Hello and welcome. Today's chapter that we are going to cover is going to be business analysis, domains, tasks, knowledge, and skills. Let's take a look at what we have and what we are going to do for our exam. We have a total of 5 domains, 28 tasks from all these 5 domains, and 40 knowledge and skills used by business analysts from these 5 domains. Let's take a look at what these domains are. The first domain we have is needs assessment. It has a total of 5 tasks, and the percentage for the exam from this domain is 18% of questions. Then we have is planning, that has 6 tasks and is 22% of your exam. The third one, analysis, it has the most number of tasks, that is 8, as well as it has the most number of questions for your PBA exam, which is 35%. Then we have traceability and monitoring, which has 5 tasks and 15% of your exam. The last one we have is evaluation, where we have 4 tasks and it is 10% of your exam. So if you see over here, if you add up the tasks, we have a total of 28 tasks. And in these 28 tasks, we are going to cover all the 40 knowledge and skills that are used by the business analyst. Now, what I have done in this course is I have color-coded and grouped these tasks with respect to the knowledge and skills, as well as with respect to which domain these knowledge and skills fall under. So the needs assessment is going to be green in color. The planning is going to be orange. Analysis is going to be blue. Traceability and monitoring going to be red, and evaluation is going to be yellow. So this is how your whole coursework is set up as, is in this color format. So if I go down here, I have all the needs assessment, knowledge and skills in the color green, and I will be covering each single one. Then as I keep going down, after needs assessment, I will go to the planning domain and cover all the planning knowledge skills. Then it comes to analysis, which is the bulk, which has the most number of questions, and that is going to be blue, where again I cover all the knowledge and skills that are required for your exam according to the PMI-PBA syllabus. Then when I go down, I have traceability and monitoring, which I said is 15% of your exam. Then we'll cover those. And the last one we have is evaluation, which is 10% of your exam and is color coded yellow. So this is how I'll be following the lectures one by one till we finish the whole complete course. But today's chapter, all we are going to do is go to the domains, tasks, and knowledge and skills that are within these domains. So we have, as I said, a total of 5 domains. but there are quite a few knowledge and skills that are used in all the domains. So I have one more added up here. I call it all domains. That means these knowledge and skills are used in every single domain that we have. So let's see the first one, and then I will go back to all domains in the end. Let's see the first one that we have in green. The first one is the needs assessment. In needs assessment, as we've seen before, we have 18%. This is 18% of your exam, or 18% of your questions are going to be asked from this chapter or this domain. And there are a total of 5 tasks. So let's see what these tasks are, as well as what does needs assessment mean. All activities related to understanding a business problem or opportunity and evaluating various inputs to develop an effective solution. So this is what we are doing in needs assessment. We are understanding the problem or the opportunity, and we evaluate a solution for that. We develop a solution for that. And for that, we are using all these different knowledge and skills that come underneath over here. So let's see what task we have. So we have task 1, where we define or review a business problem or opportunity. How do we do this? We do this using problem and opportunity analysis technique. Now this is a knowledge and skills. That's what we are going to cover in detail when we get to the respective chapter. And why do we do this? We do this to develop a solution scope statement and or to provide input to create a business case. So this is where we are working with the business problem and the business case and all the tools and techniques related to that. The task 2 is collect and analyze information from variety of different sources. Now, how are we doing that? Over here, we are using valuation tools and techniques. And why are we doing that? We're doing this to contribute to determine the value proposition for the initiative. Now we are going into a project. We want to see if that project is going to add value to the organization, add value to the portfolio. So that is the reason why we are going to be working with this task 2, and this is where we use the valuation tools and techniques. And as I said before, we'll be covering all these tools and techniques in detail when we get to the respective chapters. Then we have task 3. This is where we collaborate in the development of project goals and objectives. And how do we do that? By providing clarification of business needs and solution scope. Why do we do this? To align the product with the organization's goals and objectives. So now we know that anything we are doing with the project has to be aligned with the organization's goals and objectives. The task 4 that we are doing in this domain is identifying the stakeholders, and we do that by reviewing goals, objectives, and requirements. Why we need to do this is so that the appropriate parties are represented, informed, and involved. We want to make sure that all the stakeholders are involved during the needs assessment domain, because that is where we are going to get all our requirements from. the task 5 we have is determine stakeholders' value regarding the project by using elicitation techniques in order to provide a baseline for prioritizing requirements. So let's see the knowledge and skills that we are going to use in this domain, which is the needs assessment. So those are basically the how that comes from here. So how are we going to use it? What techniques we are going to use? So these knowledge and skills, there are these 4 knowledge and skills that fall under the need assessment domain. The numbers that you see over here, they correspond to your syllabus that came from the PMI-PBA handbook. So the number 22 knowledge and skill is going to be organization assessment. For example, organizational readiness. Then we have 26, which is problem solving and opportunity identification tools and techniques that you see over here as well, which is brainstorming, value engineering, scenario analysis, user journey maps. Then we have stakeholder analysis that's used in identify stakeholders. For example, stakeholder personas, role definitions, job analysis, skills assessment. Then we have valuation tools right here for collect and analyze information from a variety of sources. The valuation tools would be cost benefit analysis, force field analysis, Kano model, net promoter score, purpose alignment model, SWOT analysis, value stream map. So that's all that is going to be covered in the needs assessment domain. And when we get to that chapter, all the way down, I'll be covering all these knowledge and skills in detail. So that's what you can see down here in needs assessment. So we cover the valuation tools, we cover all the different knowledge and skills and techniques that's used in valuation. Then we go to stakeholder analysis, all the techniques used in stakeholder analysis, then problem solving, opportunity identification, and organizational assessment. So let's get to the next domain, which is planning. 22% of your exam is going to be in color code orange. What's done in planning is preparation that is required to effectively manage the business analysis activities that occur within the project. This includes establishing tools, policies, procedures for the requirement management plan, requirement traceability, change management, document control, and acceptance criteria. So all that is going to happen in the planning domain. Let's see what tasks do we have over here. We have to review the business case and the project goals and objectives. Why we are doing that is to provide context for the business analysis activities. Then we define strategy for requirement traceability, how we are going to trace all these requirements. So we are basically using requirement traceability tools and techniques where we use the requirement traceability matrix, etc. And why are we doing that? Is to establish the level of traceability necessary to monitor and validate these requirements, which is important because you will have so many requirements, you will have to trace these requirements. Where are these requirements? What are the test cases for these requirements? What are the use cases for these requirements? All these needs to be traced, and that's what is happening in the planning process. The third task we have is develop a requirements management plan. And we do this first by identifying stakeholders, roles and responsibilities, communication protocols, and methods for eliciting, analyzing, documenting, managing, and approving requirements. And why we are doing this is to establish a roadmap for delivering the expected solution. The task 4 that we have over here is select methods for requirement change control. So these requirements are constantly changing. And when they change, how is the change control going to happen? So this is where we work with the change control by identifying channels for communicating requests and processes for managing changes. This is where it's going to show is if there is a change request, how does it go through, how does it get communicated, and how does it get processed. And why are we doing that? So that we establish standard protocol for incorporation into the change management plan. The task 5 over here is select methods for document control. How is all the documents that we are going to use in this project going to be controlled? Where are they going to be saved? Who is going to control these documents? Who is going to have access to these documents? All that is going to be done, and how we are going to do this? By using document managed tools and techniques. Why we need to do this is to establish a standard for requirements traceability and versioning, because always in a project you keep getting new documents, you keep getting new requirements or updates. So that's why you have versions, version 1, version 2. So this needs to be managed. And why? Because we can trace the requirements and the versions when we need to. Then the task 6 that we have here is define business metrics and acceptance criteria. So this is about when this requirement is met, what is the acceptance criteria to be accepted as a complete requirement when we hand it over to the customer. So how is this going to work? Is by collaborating with stakeholders. Why we're doing that? For use in evaluating when the solution meets the requirements. So we had a problem, we identified the requirements, we got a solution. But now we have to make sure that solution is accepted by the customer. And how we're going to do that is by collaborating with stakeholders. So let's see the knowledge and skills that are covered in this how in the planning process. We have to do backlog management, change control tools and techniques, contingency planning, document management tools and techniques, elements of requirement management plans, estimating tools and techniques, for example, estimation poker, quadrant analysis, averaging. Then we use planning tools and techniques, for example, strategic and tactical planning. We have prioritization tools and techniques to prioritize the requirements, for example, multi-voting, weighted criteria, Moscow. And the last one of the knowledge and skill that we have over here is scheduling tools and techniques. Okay, so that's what happens in the planning domain, and we will cover this in detail. This is 22% of the exam, and there are a lot of knowledge and skills that we need to cover, and a total of 6 tasks. Let's get to the third one. The third one is analysis, 35% of the exam, and it has the most knowledge and skills, and it has the most tasks that are there. In analysis, what we are doing is breaking down all these requirements. The analysis domain centers on requirement management activities. So we are breaking them down, we are going to manage them, and we are going to use tasks such as how we elicit the requirements, how we analyze the requirements, how we decompose the requirements, how the requirements are accepted, approval, specification, validation of the requirement for a product or project. Now to do this, we are using a total of 8 tasks, and the tasks are, the first one being elicit or identify requirements. And to do this, we are using individual and group elicitation techniques. This is where we sit with the experts and the stakeholders, and we identify all the requirements that are needed for our project. And why we need to do this is to discover and capture requirements with supporting detailed example, origin, and rationale. The task 2 that we have over here is analyze, decompose, and elaborate requirements. So this is where all the decomposition, all the breaking down, all the analyzing is done on these requirements. And for doing this, we use techniques such as dependency analysis, as in how the requirements are dependent of each other. We do interface analysis, data and process modeling. Why we need to do that is to collaboratively uncover and clarify product options and capabilities. The third task we have here is evaluate product options and capabilities. And how we are doing that is using decision-making techniques and valuation techniques. Why? To determine which requirements are accepted, which are deferred, or which are rejected. Then we have is task 4, which is allocate requirements by balancing scope, schedule, budget, and resource constraint with the value proposition. And we are doing this by using prioritization. We are using dependency analysis and decision-making tools and techniques. Why we need to do that is because we need to create a requirements baseline. The 5th task is obtain sign-off on the requirement baseline. So we have the requirement baseline, everything that needs to be there, but we have to obtain the sign-off. And to do this, we are using decision-making techniques. Why? To facilitate stakeholder consensus and achieve stakeholder approval. So you want to get these sign-offs from the stakeholders, but everyone should be ready with the requirements and agree to the requirements. And for that, you might need to use some decision-making techniques to facilitate stakeholder consensus. Task 6 we have is write requirement specifications. Now these requirement specifications are process, data, and interface details. The process includes writing use cases, writing user stories, etc. Depending on what type of a project methodology you are using. Like in waterfall methodology, you would use use cases, while in agile methodology, you would be using user stories. Why are we doing requirement specification? Is to communicate these requirements that are measurable and actionable, that is suitable for development. So the developers are going to take these requirements and they are going to develop that requirement. The testers are going to test these requirements. So that is why we need detailed requirement specifications. The next one is validating these requirements using tools and techniques such as documentation review, prototypes, demos, and other validation methods. And why do we do that? Is to ensure requirements are complete, accurate, and aligned with goals, objectives, and value proposition. The last task we have over here is elaborate and specify detailed metrics and acceptance criteria by using measurement tools and techniques for use in evaluating whether the solution meets the requirement. So this is the acceptance criteria to make sure that the solution that has been produced or designed accepts the acceptance criteria and meets all the requirements. So the knowledge and skills that are used here, as you see there are a lot of them, is analytical tools and techniques, example decomposition, progressive elaboration, dependency analysis, gap analysis, impact analysis, risk analysis, and assessment. Business rule analysis tools and techniques, for example decision table, decision tree, rule catalog. Data analysis tools and techniques, for example data model, data dictionary, state diagrams. Decision making tools, for example Delphi technique, multi-voting, consensus building, option analysis. Elicitation tools and techniques, for example brainstorming, focus groups, interviewing techniques, workshop facilitation, observation, document analysis, research, surveys, questionnaires. Interface analysis, for example prototyping, storyboarding, interoperability. So now you're seeing there are so many knowledge and skills that we need to know for this exam. And as I said before, when we go to that respective domain, we are going to cover each and every single one in detail, so we are well prepared for our exam. Then we see process analysis tools and techniques, example how to write user stories, how to write use cases, what are process models, then dependency diagrams, events, data flow diagrams. Next one is the project methodologies, depending on what type of a project we have and what project methodology has been used. Examples of some of the methodologies are waterfall, agile, iterative, lean, and how they can impact requirements and business analysis practices. Because if you are using waterfall, the requirements are managed in a certain way, while you're using agile, they are different because agile is all about change. So this is where the requirements are changing all the time. But in the waterfall methodology, it's not that flexible, where the requirements cannot change much. So depending on that, we have to plan how the business practices are going to get impacted and which is the best project methodology to choose from. Requirement type, for example business requirements, stakeholder requirements, solution requirements, transition requirements, project and quality requirements. Then we look into the root cause analysis, for example Ishikawa, Fishbone, and 5 whys to find the root cause of the problem. And then the last one we have is system thinking, is basically how everything works together and make the project sustainable, doing sustainable design and make sure that everything is in place, everyone is involved towards creating this project. Then we have the next domain, which is traceability and monitoring. This is domain number 4, 15% of your exam. This includes activities related to managing the life cycle of requirements, The tasks within this domain comprise the continuous monitoring and documenting of requirements, as well as communication of the requirements status to stakeholders. So we are using 5 different tasks over here, and we are working with the requirements. One of the main things is tracking the requirements. And to track the requirements, we use traceability tools and techniques for capturing the requirement status, sources, and relationship, including dependencies. Why we need to do this is to provide evidence that the requirements are delivered as stated. So tracking requirements is one of the most important things that happens in this domain. So the next one being monitoring these requirements throughout the life cycle. Again, using the traceability artifact or tool, which is a traceability matrix, to ensure supporting requirement artifacts such as models, documentation, and test cases are produced, reviewed, and approved at each time of the life cycle. The third task we have here is updating the requirement status as it moves through the life cycles. So someone needs to update these requirements. We make sure that these are updated as it moves through the life cycle, which is the start of the requirement, development of the requirement, finalization of the requirement. By communicating with appropriate stakeholders and recording changes in the traceability artifact of the tools. So you are going to communicate all these requirements to the stakeholders on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, depending on how the communication is going to be. You're going to update them on the status as to where this requirement is. And why we need to do this is basically to track requirements towards closure. Task 4 is communicate requirement status to project manager and stakeholders. So as we were just talking about communicating these requirements to the project manager, to the stakeholders, where we are at now with this requirement, how long is this requirement going to take to complete, or if the requirement is already complete, or we need more time for this requirement, or there are changes with this requirement. All this need to be communicated, and we do that using the communication tools to keep them informed of the requirement issues, conflict, changes, risk, and overall status. The task 5 is manage requirement changes. Now this requirement change always goes to the change control board, and how it is handled, who is going to handle that, all is going to be included in managing the requirement changes. How we do that? By assessing the impacts of the requirement change, how the dependencies are going to be affected because of the requirement change, and how is it going to add risk to the project in accordance to the change control plan and comprising to the requirement baseline. Why we are doing it is to maintain the integrity of the requirements and associated artifacts. Now the knowledge and skills that we use for this is reporting tools and techniques, requirement traceability tools and techniques, version control tools and techniques. So that was the 4th domain. When we get to this chapter, we are going to cover all these requirement tools and techniques in details with examples. The last one we have over here is the evaluation domain, which is 10% of the exam. Activities that relate to the assessment of how well the delivered solution fulfills the requirements and meets the business need. Tasks within this domain include testing the solution, determining if there are gaps, and obtaining sign-offs. So we have 4 tasks over here. One is to validate the solutions, test results, reports, and other test evidence. Now we need to validate all these requirements before the project is complete and we hand it over to the customer. So we need to validate all the requirements are met. Okay, how are we going to do that? It's against the requirement acceptance criteria. So we are going to check the acceptance criteria for the requirements and we are going to check it off, and that's when we are going to deliver to the customer. Why we do this is to determine whether solution satisfies the requirement. Then the task 2 we have is analyze and communicate the solution's identified gaps and details using quality assurance tools and methods. This is to enable stakeholders to resolve discrepancies between solution scope, requirement, and developed solution. The third one is obtaining stakeholder sign-off on the developed solution, and we do this using the decision-making technique in order to proceed with deployment. So before it goes into deployment, these requirements should get a sign-off from the stakeholders saying that, okay, this is what we agreed for, this is what we wanted, and this is satisfying the acceptance criteria, everything is working fine. Then we make a decision and then it proceeds to deployment. Task 4 is evaluate the deployed solution using valuation techniques in order to determine how well the solution meets the business case and value proposition. So once it's deployed, we evaluate the deployed solution, we test the program or the software, we do UAT, user assurance testing, where everything looks good or not, and how it satisfies the business case and adds value proposition. The knowledge and skills that are used here is lessons learned and retrospectives. So we can use these lessons for our future projects. Measurement tools and techniques, for example, plan gauge, service level agreement, quality management, validation tools and techniques, example, acceptance criteria, for example given, when, then, user acceptance testing, verification methods and techniques, for example, inspection, test, walkthrough, desk checking, and peer review. So these are the 5 domains that we need to cover, and especially all these 40 knowledge and skills in detail to understand our PMI-PBA exam and pass it in the first go. So we just saw a review of these 5 domains. Now one more thing I would like to cover is a domain where the knowledge and skills are used in all of these domains. So we have a number of knowledge and skills that are used, and you saw the way I put it in all the different domains, like this domain needs these knowledge and skills, but there are knowledge and skills that are used in each and every domain. So it's not specific just to one domain, and that's what I have put it up here in gray, where we have these many knowledge and skills that are used in each and every domain that we have. So starting with the first one is collaboration tools and techniques. So for example, collaboration is used in needs assessment, collaboration is used in planning, collaboration is used in analysis, collaboration is used in traceability and monitoring, as well as evaluation. So it's not just in one of these, it's used in all the different domains. Now same goes with communication skills, techniques and tools, because you are communicating throughout the project, not just in one domain. Then we have conflict management and resolution tools and techniques. Again, conflict can happen anytime during the project. So how we manage the conflict, what are the tools and techniques? We have the next one, which is decision-making tools and techniques. Example, Delphi, multivoting, consensus building, option analysis. Now again, decision making is also happening throughout the project. It's not just in the beginning. Development methodologies, for example, agile, iterative, incremental, waterfall. Facilitation tools and techniques, leadership principles and skills. Negotiation tools and techniques. Again, we need to negotiate with the stakeholders, with the customer, with the project manager, with anyone and everyone on the team. Then we need political and cultural awareness. The last one being reporting tools and techniques. So all these are used in all the different domains. It's not specific to one domain. That is why it has been put in all domains in gray. So when I start with my detailed lectures, I will cover all these individual knowledge and skills one by one. So starting with all domains, I'm going to finish this, and then I will go to the next one, which is the needs assessment. I'll go through each and every single one and keep going till planning. Then we have analysis. Then we have traceability and monitoring, and finally evaluation. So all these needs to be done, so please stay tuned, and we will cover this one by one till we finish the whole course. So I hope you are enjoying the lecture so far, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you.